Sod being a dancing camel. I'm off.
Get back here now, you stupid camel. Get here! Get back here!
If you want me to come back, I want more money, more time off, and more respect.
Those are all very reasonable demands that no sane man could possibly refuse.
You mean you will meet my demands?
No, of course I won't. Welcome back to my second battle report, and this one is tank hunting in the foothills, so let's get on and look at the scenario.
The Northern Coalition is advancing south, but an abyssal dwarf artillery position in the foothills of the Heartbreak Mountains is well placed to hit the coalition advance in the flank. 2 cavalry troops were sent to deal with the artillery, but the dwarfs had poisoned the hillside around their position. The remnants of the cavalry returned to the coalition positions, bearing scars from the poison, and telling tales of soldiers brought down in clouds of poison gas. The abyssal dwarf artillery could cause havoc if not dealt with. After deliberation, it was determined that the coalition would commit 2 dwarf steel behemoths to the attack. The crews of the Iron Beasts could close and seal the hatches, to avoid breathing in the toxic fumes. For the geeky spotters, the armored fighting vehicle enthusiasts, you will see that the steel behemoths are both the Island Pattern Mark III versions, with one upgraded to the Mark III Alpha version through repositioning of the exhausts. 2 troops of Kingdoms of Men Berserkers would provide infantry support, until near the poison zone. The troops selected were the elite of the elite and enjoyed both nimble and pathfinder attributes. The abyssal dwarf artillery comprised an Anchor heavy mortar, and a Katsyachan rocket launcher. These had been modified, so that they can fire in the direct fire mode against targets closer than 12 inches. The concentric alliance was hard-pressed elsewhere on the battlefield, and the only support that could be found for the artillery were 4 goblin wizards. These were drugged with Potion of Bravery, and each was issued with a rudimentary form of the Alchemist's Curse. Unfortunately, this had been prepared so quickly that it had a range of only 6 inches. The goblins were also given 2 anti-tank mines that could be placed in advance of the battle. If a behemoth runs over a mine, it suffers d6 plus 4 piercing 4 hits, and is wavered for the remainder of that turn. If the behemoth was moving at the double or charging, it suffers d6 plus 6 hits. The goblins were also issued 4 dummy mines to confuse the enemy. The goblins are cunning, and can hide in or behind cover and difficult terrain of any height. They start the battle in cover, with their positions marked on a map. They will only be spotted by the enemy if they move, or an enemy unit moves up to the covering terrain, stops moving, and in the shooting phase does not shoot, but declares that it is searching for goblins.
Okay, well that was the scenario. Let's have a quick look at the battlefield. You can see in the bottom right there's the abyssal dwarf artillery position, and the hill itself is poisoned, so only the steel behemoths will be able to get onto the hill there. You'll see north is off to the right hand side, and the Northern Coalition forces will be coming on from the southwest, heading towards the abyssal dwarf hill. You can see the terrain, lots of difficult terrain there. The 2 height 4 difficult terrain woods. Walls are height 1 obstacles, but are not considered as obstacles to the nimble coalition infantry. We've got 2 areas of flat difficult terrain as well, and the blocking terrain on the edge of the map there, and so the abyssal dwarf artillery position can only be assaulted from the left. There's the battlefield looking from the start line of the Northern Coalition positions, looking towards the Abyssal Dwarf Hill. There's the Abyssal Dwarf engineers. You see we've got the 6 mines, 4 dummy mines, 2 real mines. I'm about to go and dig those in to assist the goblins. And that's the position now, with the artillery in position on the hill, the mortar and the rocket launcher. And you can see there are 6 mines potentially on the battlefield, and the enemy, the Northern Coalition, will know which of those are real mines and which are dummy. The Northern Coalition decides to concentrate its force on one side of the battlefield and opts for that side, which I think gives a slightly better approach towards the Abyssal Dwarves. Close up of their position there. So, turn 1. And it's the Northern Coalition to move, and as you can see, the 2 troops of infantry move forward to move up to the obstacle and into the terrain to see if they can spot any of the goblins. And that's where they end up, and the 2 steel behemoths move slightly, so they've got an arc of fire, so they can use their breath weapon if any of the goblins are spotted this turn. And the troops going into the wood spot one goblin which is on the far side of the wood, which is good positioning from him because of course the steel behemoth, which is not in the wood, cannot actually see him or engage him there. And the other infantry who move up to the wall of the fields there do not spot any goblins within that field. There's no possibility of shooting that turn, so it moves on to the goblins' move, and that wizard there moves up to a position on the flank where he can get within range of the steel behemoth to cast his spell. Another goblin was positioned behind this wood over here, but is well out of position now that the Northern Coalition has decided to come on the other side of the board, and so he openly moves across towards the enemy positions. In the shooting phase, everything up on the hill opens up on one of the steel behemoths, and the wizard over there in the woods also opens fire on one of the behemoths. You can see that the mortar actually hits once, causes 4 wounds on that steel behemoth, but the nerve roll is a 9 and that behemoth is okay. And this wizard who's moved over here into position casts his spell, gets 4 hits and causes 4 wounds. But again, nerve roll, the steel behemoth is okay. But both of them after the first turn are both wounded, and that's a bit of a blow for the Northern Coalition. That's the position at the end of the first turn, going into turn 2. And again, the 2 units of infantry move. One in the wood charges the wizard in the wood, and the other one moves up to the far side of the field in order to look for goblins behind that wall. And the 2 steel behemoths move forward. And in the shooting phase, this infantry unit spots a second goblin behind the wall there, but you can see in the background there's a steel behemoth well positioned to use its breath weapon on that goblin. It does use a breath weapon but only causes 3 wounds, which with a nerve roll of 5 is not enough to affect the goblin, and that could be difficult for the next turn for the coalition. Inevitably this unit kills the goblin and reforms in that direction. In the Chaos Dwarf and Goblin move, that goblin moves forward, so is in range of a steel behemoth for his spell, and the other goblin who'd come across the country from the other wood moves up towards the wall, and keeping out of the charge arc of the infantry inside that field. The shooting phase, the goblin over there lets go with his spell at one of the steel behemoths, and everything on the hill also has a go at the steel behemoths. 6 wounds caused on that behemoth from the spell, but even a total of 10 wounds, a double 1 on the nerve roll, so that behemoth is okay, and all the other artillery missed. Moving on to turn 3. The Northern Coalition realise that now on turn 3 they've got to grasp the nettle, and they decide they're going to have to take a risk and run over one of those mines and hope it's a dummy. So the two steel behemoths are moving forward. Both infantry are moving forward. The one in the woods is going to move forward towards the next bit of difficult terrain. The one in the field is going to move over towards the goblin in order to prevent it getting close enough this turn to the two steel behemoths to cast its spell. And as I say, they're taking a risk that that mine they're going to run over is a dummy. And in fact, as they do go over it, they see that it is a dummy. So they got away with that one. We've moved up like that, and you can see that the infantry over here have got into this piece of flat, difficult terrain. They'll be able to search now for any goblin wizards in that area. And there are none within that piece of difficult terrain. Over there, the steel behemoth at the back there is going to use its breath weapon again on the goblin in the open there, and another 4 wounds, and routs it this turn. In the goblin, the Abyssal Dwarf phase, the goblin that was looking at those infantry decides discretion is the better part of valour and moves backwards over here. And everything on the hill shoots. The mortar misses, but rocket launcher hits with 1, which becomes blast D3 becomes 3, and causes another 3 wounds on that leading behemoth, bringing it up to 7, and then rolls a 9 on the nerve roll, which is a 17, which is a 16, but that's still not enough, and so that behemoth survives. But again, they're both taking wounds here. Moving on to turn 4. And the Northern Coalition moves like this. The 2 steel behemoths move forward, 1 on the right there into the difficult terrain, and the 2 infantry move over this way towards the goblin in the open, and the one that was in the fields has moved into that difficult terrain to search for more goblins over here. And they find one behind that difficult terrain there. The shooting phase, that steel behemoth is close enough to the artillery position, and it fires at the mortar there, causing 3 wounds and then wavering it on the nerve check. So that's a major blow for the Abyssal Dwarves. Over here, the second steel behemoth fires over the top of its own infantry into that goblin wizard there, causes 5 wounds and wavers it. So that won't be throwing any spells towards the behemoths this turn. And in the Abyssal Dwarf and Goblin turn, the Goblin who was over here has moved back out of the charge arc and charge range of those 2 infantry berserkers. The second Goblin, who was wavered, turned backwards and moved at half speed away. Now looking at that diagram there, it looks like they moved slightly more than half speed, but I don't think that's going to affect the battle. In the shooting phase, the rocket launcher up here has a go at the steel behemoths and causes 1 more wound on the rearmost steel behemoth. This is now up to 11, but only rolls a 6. That's 1 away from a waver, so that's a bit of bad luck there. Turn 5. The 2 berserker infantry troops move towards the 1 wizard over here in the open. The steel behemoth on the left there charges the wavering wizard, and one on the right is still out of charge range of the hill with the artillery on, so it's moving forward again through the difficult terrain. And you can see the final position of the move. The charge there has got into the goblin. The move there has brought it closer to the artillery pieces, and the 2 infantry units down here have moved in such a way that that goblin cannot move any closer, or cannot move close enough to the steel behemoth to cast its spell because of the position they've moved to. If he moved any closer, he'd be within 1 inch of those units, so it's not going to be in a position to move forward and cast his spell. In the shooting phase again, that behemoth opens up again on the mortar and does another 2 wounds, rolled a 9 on the nerve roll, and that mortar is now routed. Over here, inevitably, that goblin says goodbye to life as he's routed, and the steel behemoth reforms in a position like this. Now, in the goblin and abyssal dwarf turn, I'm going to say something you don't hear very much. That goblin wizard charges the steel behemoth. I'll say that again. The goblin wizard charges the steel behemoth. And the reason he's done that is he wasn't going to be able to get close enough to cast his spell, but as he charges, he is allowed to go within 1 inch of those infantry. The steel behemoth is within charge range, and he figures that if he goes up and charges this turn, he'll be well positioned at the start of the next turn to cast his spell. And that's the position he ends up in. So he's hindered with 1 attack. You never know though, he might get all wounds through if he's lucky. And in the shooting phase, the rocket launcher has a go at the steel behemoth in the back there. Hits with 1, causes 1 more wound, bringing him up to 12, and then rolls a 7. That's 19. That's enough to waver that steel behemoth. So that won't be taking any part in the battle in the next turn. And almost inevitably that goblin bounces off. He did in fact hit, even though he's wavered. He did hit, but he couldn't wound through the toughness of the Defence 6 armour. That's the position at the end of this phase. Now I should just point out that that steel behemoth is just out of charge range of the cannon at this stage. Moving on to turn 6. The steel behemoth is very worried with up to 7 wounds, and very worried that if he allowed that wizard to cast his spell, been a problem. So what he's done is he's moved forward and pivoted 90 degrees. He is now within charge range of the cannon, of the rocket launcher on the hill, but can also just see the back of that wizard, and so he'll be able to breath weapon the wizard. 2 troops of Berserker infantry move forward, and the other behemoth is wavered and cannot do anything. In the shooting phase, shoots the wizard but only causes 3 wounds, and then rolls a 5 on the nerve roll. So he's not even wavered that wizard. So that is going to be a bit of a problem. Turn 6 for the abyssal dwarves and goblins. The rocket launcher on the hill manages to hit twice, becomes 4 hits effectively with its D3 blast and causes 2 wounds, and the magic spell from the wizard causes another 4, so that's another total of 6 wounds, bringing the behemoth up to 13. And there's a 13 wounds. This could be effectively the end of the battle, but a roll of 4 on the nerve check is not enough to even waver that steel behemoth. We roll to see if there's a turn 7, and there is. And in the turn 7, the behemoth charges up the hill into the cannon, into the rocket launcher, and the berserkers charge the wizard in the difficult terrain. Inevitably, those berserkers kill the wizard. There's a view from the berserkers looking up the hill towards the battle on the hill. And the behemoth charges in, does more than the 12 wounds I've showed there. I just ran out of dice. Rolled a 9 on the nerve roll, and the abyssal dwarf cannon rocket launcher is routed, giving a win for the Northern Coalition. So, bit of post-battle review. Just to show where the other mines actually were, the Coalition force were lucky going through there because there's a mine on that position there. And that's where the other live mine was. Just to explain the Concentric Alliance plan, they had the 4 goblins hidden in the line there and the 2 mines there, and the hope was that this would force the Northern Coalition to move through the difficult terrain, slowing it down, giving more chance for the artillery to attack it. To a certain extent that worked, but the Northern Coalition eventually decided they were going to go through that open terrain anyway, and were lucky in that they didn't go over one of the live minefields. The plan for the Northern Alliance was to use the infantry troops to move forward into the terrain and to search for the goblins, and that's where they found one, and then for the steel behemoths behind the goblins having been exposed to then be in a position to breath weapon them. And again, that worked to a certain extent, although over on the right there, by positioning the goblin behind the terrain, not in it, it meant that the steel behemoth was not able to engage it on that first turn. So a bit of a summary then. It's an exciting game with some lucky nerve rolls on both sides at different times. Perhaps some of those things should have been wavering, which weren't. Hidden movement was complicated. I think if you could play this with a proper umpire, perhaps, you could actually have hidden movement. So the goblins could actually move if they were out of the line of sight of any of the Northern Coalition forces. They could perhaps have moved on the map, and that might have made the game slightly easier for them. But I do think in hindsight it's difficult for the Northern Coalition player to achieve the objective in 6 turns, and perhaps if you're going to play it again, maybe allow more than 6 turns with a potential 7th for the game. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this battle report.